I'd like to welcome you now to listen to a session with the Port of London Authority, and I'd like to welcome Jenny and Sarah, and they'll talk a little bit about how they look after the River Thames. If you'd like to ask any questions, please pop them in the chat, and then we'll pick up with Jenny and Sarah at the end of the session. Over to you, ladies.
Hi there everyone, my name is Jenny Cooper. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at the Port of London Authority. I'm just twizzling my screen along now. This is Sarah, who you'll hear from shortly. She's our Harbour Master. So, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the port. I'm just going to share my screen with you in 2 seconds. Here we are. So we'll touch a little bit about long-term goals for the tidal Thames. We'll touch a little bit on Sarah's role in the maritime sector, including the different steps she's taken on her career journey, the skills she's developed and the highlights of that career. And we have plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. So do please send those through. That will help keep the conversation flowing and really provide you with an opportunity to find out that information that's key for you as you're considering your future careers. Okay, so a little bit about the Port of London Authority. And from this point, I'll call it PLA. A little bit quicker. So established in 1909, we maintain and supervise navigation on the tidal Thames and protect the river's environment. So which bit's tidal? For any of you who aren't familiar, we've got the arrow in the bottom left-hand corner there. Teddington is the point at which the river stops being tidal in West London. And over in the east, right out into the North Sea. So we've got a 95-mile stretch from Teddington to the North Sea that we look after. If you'd like to find out any more information about the organisation in general, do check out our websites. And we're quite active on Twitter and Instagram. And we also have an apprentices Instagram, which is PLA_apprentice. If you want to check that out. Okay, and next bit to let you know is that we do have ambitious plans for the river over the next 20 years. And we've set this out in a strategy known as the Thames Vision. I'm just going to touch on that for a couple of minutes now. So we'll be increasing trade, freight and passenger transport. Hopefully that's good news for the maritime sector in terms of careers and opportunities in the future to come. We are the UK's biggest port, handling over 50 million tonnes of cargo each year. So in the top left photo there, you've got an aerial shot of big shipping containers coming in there, and you can see a little bit as to what some of the port activity look like. In the top right, you've got a photo showing all of the safety management systems, all of vessel services, and the support that's required to get those boats safely up the river. We move 5 million tonnes of inland freight inland, and there are over 10 million passenger journeys taken on the River Thames each year. Of course, that's taking thousands of lorries and cars off London's busy roads, and there's a lot of green benefits for the river environment there. We're also a fantastic place for people to enjoy London culture, people enjoying the Thames and its banks through events, art installations, education, and exhibitions. That's not just for local people, of course. We're very popular as a tourism hotspot. In the top left there, you've got a photo of New Year's Eve and the fireworks, which we're involved in, and Sarah might touch on. We organised the Jubilee procession for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee pageant on the river, if that was a few years ago now. Some of you might have been quite young. And then the top right-hand corner there, there's Illuminated River, which is actually an art installation going on right through London. It's fantastic to see on the night time. I really recommend it if you're down this way at all. Of course, the Thames is also enjoyed by walkers, sailors, rowers, canoers, and stand-up paddleboarders every single day. And we've got a huge amount of space. If you compare that with football, we've actually got over 15,000 football pitches of space. So that's really exciting and certainly provides an adventure for people on the river. It's also, whilst we're developing all of this, we've got to be incredibly careful, incredibly proactive around the environment. We've got a really proactive environment team here at the PLA, and we're covering everything from water quality, air quality, litter and removing equipment. There's an enormous project going on, which I encourage you to check out. Tideway building the super sewer at the moment. You can see the second row down on the far right, there's a cylinder. That's actually a tunnel boring machine that's going to be drilling through the ground, and that was moved by river, as you can see in the bottom left photo. In fact, Tideway are moving a lot of their materials. The vast majority of their materials are moved by river, taking lorries off the road. And we do foreshore clear ups. There's lots and lots of interesting stuff. Do check out our environment web pages. We do have listed on the next page, we have a few examples of careers within the PLA. Over on the left hand side, we've got things that tend to be ashore, and on the right hand side, we've got our roles which tend to be afloat. As an organisation, covering that 95 miles does take up quite a bit of manpower, as you can imagine. We actually employ over 400 people. And just to bring us on to our next step, you're now going to be hearing from one of our harbour masters, Sarah. Just pass the laptop across.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's going to take a little bit of time to take you through my career thus far. So when I left school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I'd spoken with a careers advisor and we come up with a number of options which didn't really fit with what I fancied doing. I'd always dreamed of being a French teacher until I got to about 17 years old. And then when I was rowing and sailing on the Thames estuary, I suddenly went, no, I don't really fancy doing French anymore at university. I think I fancy going to sea. Having spoken with the careers advisor about that, she wasn't really sure whether that would suit, but it was something that I really, really wanted to do. So I turned down the opportunity to go to university and decided to take up an apprenticeship with the Port of London Authority, which I'd seen online. I spent 3 years with the Port of London Authority as a marine trainee. It was a wide-ranging port training scheme, so I dipped into all manner of things with the Port of London Authority. So anything from vessel traffic services, which you seen a picture of earlier in the presentation, through to salvage boats, so picking things out of the river and laying buoys to make sure that vessels could navigate safely up the river, right the way through to working with the harbour masters who maintains navigational safety on the river, which I'll come back to a bit later in my career. When I got to the end of my 3 years training, I decided to take the leap and go to sea. That was quite a big step for me, and when I left school I wasn't really ready for it, but after 3 years with the Port of London Authority I was. So I was lucky enough to get a cadetship with Trinity House. So that was a deck cadetship, so I started with them on both college and seafaring training scheme. After just over 3 years with them, I qualified as a third officer and was lucky enough to take up a position with Stena Line as third officer. So that was shipping both passengers and freight across the Irish Sea from Holyhead to Dublin. I spent about 3 years as a third officer gaining my sea time, which enabled me to go and get my chief officer's certificate, and became a second officer, both covering loading cargo and a navigational watch, and also then stepping up to chief officer where I was managing the crew on board looking after central London. It's a very busy and vibrant part of scaffolding under a bridge to look after it and maintain it. Or alternatively, on another day, I could be working on an event such as New Year's Eve. There's a lot of planning goes into New Year's Eve, as I'm sure you can imagine, and we have to close the river to navigation, so we stop boats from navigating near the fireworks. I was then very fortunate to be asked to step up to cover a colleague who had gone off on sick leave and was acting harbour master for about 6 weeks prior to my permanent appointment as harbour master during a restructure. As harbour master, I'm then more senior to the deputies, so I'm managing the deputies and the assistant harbour masters from day to day. And I'm also looking at the safety of people, safety of navigation, so building any permanent structures in the river and how that might affect it. And I've been lucky enough to be managing the closure to navigation of Hammersmith Bridge, which has been a really involved project and is affecting a lot of people at the moment. So there's a lot of responsibility in that. However, I have taken the decision, whilst I'm running as a harbour master with the Port of London, to go back to sea to get my Master Mariner's ticket. That will give me a huge amount of options when I finish that. I can come back again as a harbour master and pick up where I've left off. Or alternatively, I could come back as a pilot, go into marine law. There's lots and lots of different options available to you with that Master Mariner's ticket. I think just to sum up my career, really, it's been really diverse, and the marine industry is a very unusual place in that you can pick up in one part of the sector and move to an entirely different part, and you get really great transferable skills, which I'll cover off in just a minute. And all the while I've been doing all of these different things, I've also been a volunteer crew member for Gravesend Lifeboat, which is something I do to give back to the industry that I take a career from. So just a little bit on my skills. So along the way, I've picked up a number of different qualifications. There's some really big ones and some that just come with the territory. So I've got my Chief Mate Unlimited certificate, so that's something that I've gained through my seafaring career. But I also have my Boatmaster's licence and Thames Local Knowledge Endorsement, which I got prior to going to sea. So working on the river, that's something that you can do in just over 2 years if you get an apprenticeship on the River Thames or anywhere in the UK on inland waterways. I've also picked up a lot of technical expertise in my some 12 years now in the marine industry. And going with the territory, you have to have good IT skills, whether it be for operating an ECDIS at sea, so an electronic charting system, or a radar, or more mundanely, sitting at a desk answering emails or setting up event planning. Soft skills wise, you have to be very patient in this industry. You work with a number of, both lovely and very challenging people, so you have to be very patient. Time management's also key. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times in the day where I've got more to do than I have time for. So you have to be very, very good at making sure that you get the important things done first before you pick up on the perhaps less time urgent things later. Again, people management is very, very important. I currently manage a team of some 40 people, including our boat crews. And at sea, I was managing a very close-knit team of, it was about 25 people on a day-to-day basis, both in emergency management and day-to-day operations of a ship. Negotiation is also a key skill. You have to find a suitable outcome for different people in sometimes very challenging situations. And having confidence in your own convictions is also key, knowing that even if you don't necessarily make the right choice or you make a mistake, you follow through and make sure that you get the right outcome. And just a little bit about the pictures at the top, just for interest. So on the left was a picture of me when I got my first stripe as a deck officer. So that was when I got assigned, appointed as a third officer. Second from left is when I was in a dry dock. So underneath the ship in a tiny little yellow spot, that was me stood underneath the bulbous bow of a ship in a dry dock in Belfast. In the middle is my Chief Mate certificate, which was a very, very proud day for me. It's taken a lot of years and a lot of work to get to that stage. Again, towards the right now, second from right, was when I got my foundation degree in nautical science. And on the far right is me stood on a ship when I was undertaking loading operations. So loading lots and lots of trailers onto a ship. So the backs of articulated lorries onto a ship, which come on with special things called tugmasters. And that's another place where I learned good time management. You have to load a lot of cargo onto a ship in quite a small space of time. So, career highlights. I think, as I've just covered off, my Chief Mate's ticket was a highlight, as was my appointment as Harbour Master. It's a real honour to be a Harbour Master with the Port of London Authority, and a great responsibility as well. I'm a part of this very small team managing 95 miles of tidal Thames and ensuring that the ships that come into the port can navigate safely on the river. The career that I've chosen brings a real variety day to day. So as I said before, one day I'll be managing an event to deciding whether a new pier can go into the river. And those decisions that I make and those projects that I'm involved with make a real difference to the river community and to the Port of London as a whole. Seeing an event through from start to finish, so on the right you can see a picture of the New Year's Eve fireworks. I worked with another colleague on the 2019 fireworks display, and it was a real honour to stand on the harbour service launch, one of our boats, on that night, managing the closure and watching those fireworks from first hand, having seen what went into them, the amount of planning and energy that we had to put in to make sure that event came off without a hitch. And managing a team as well, whilst it can be challenging, I've met some really, really lovely people, and I have, you know, the honour of working with such a great team and being part of that. Not so good is the amount of things I have to fit into my day. It's a very, very busy job, and I do find myself working outside of normal office hours, which can be a good thing, but it can also be a real challenge. When there's an emergency on the river, I get called, somebody will call my phone, and I may have to come into work in the middle of the night to sort that out. and dealing with challenging people as well. It's a bit of a strange one that, you know, whilst we work with some lovely people, there are also some really challenging people, and you have to sometimes find a balance of how to deal with those people and make sure that everybody gets the best outcome. And I'd like to invite you to ask any questions now.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that fascinating insight into your career journey. And it's lovely to see that you're still learning, you're still training, and you're still getting new qualifications. Can you just pick up slightly on the transferable skills and how important you have found those, especially moving from your sort of land-based ashore jobs to being back at sea?
Oh, transferable skills. I think they come originally from my seafaring career. So, having started, I started as a marine trainee with the Port of London, which was partly ashore and partly afloat. So that gave me a real opportunity to get both boat handling skills, skills of using electronic navigation equipment and IT equipment, and also having the other side of the coin of what goes on behind the scenes to make the river tick. I then gained further skills when I was working at sea, so that would be things like time management, people management, and learning about shipping in general. So, you know, you have to learn how to load a ship and how to navigate a ship to then be able to understand how that works, to then come back into a shoreside career where you can understand then what the problems are when an emergency happens on a ship, or when you're considering the impact that something that you're going to build in the river will have on those ships coming into port. I think, having worked ashore for a year, I have learned a lot about managing a team, communicate with people, and that's something I will take back with me to sea. And I hope that when I go back to my job as a second officer, I will have much better communication skills and management skills than I had before.
Thank you, Sarah. And if I can I ask about apprenticeships at the Port of London Authority? Sort of, you know, which areas do you take apprentices in, and about how many do you take in each year?
So I think over the past year, I think talking about 6 apprentices. I've spoken to our HR department prior to this today to find out where people can find out more information if they're interested. The best thing to do is actually check out the PLA Instagram for our apprentices, and just keep up to date on our LinkedIn and on our website for any updates on that. There aren't any positions available at present, but if there are to be, then they will be up on our website.
That's lovely, Sarah. And if I can I ask you about your career journey, and what do you love about working in maritime?
Yeah, so my role's a bit different, really. Hence the focus being on a harbour master, because it does relate directly to maritime and can be seen within the industry in different roles. My role is actually to develop sport and community outreach on the river. So across that 95-mile stretch of river, as mentioned earlier, we've got a key goal around using it as a recreational space for people to enjoy, get active, keep healthy, and make the most of as a sporting venue. So my role is actually working with clubs and sporting organisations, so it's quite unique. It's not typical of maritime.
Okay, and moving back to Sarah, can I very quickly ask then, what, if it's not secret, what is your next big project for the River Thames?
Ooh, there's one I can't tell you about that's quite big. We've got quite a few unusual bits and pieces coming up in central London over the next couple of months, so definitely watch this space. There's a few things that you won't be expecting to see on the river. Otherwise, I think the current big project that I can speak about to a certain extent would be Hammersmith Bridge and the unfortunate closure of Hammersmith Bridge.
Now I'm intrigued. I want to know what Sarah's working on this. We're going to see in London, because I've not heard anything. So I'll have to be finding out.
Can I ask them, you know, can you tell us about one of the more challenging events that you've had to put on the Thames?
Okay, I think just one of the more unusual ones that I was directly involved with managing was they had an Amazon Prime event hosted by Tower Bridge. So they decided to have a barge moored on a pier, and then they had baseball players on board the barge, and they were hitting balls off of it. That was quite unusual and threw up a few challenges about having to close certain arches of the bridge and having the appropriate traffic management, so having one of our boats there to manage traffic past it and make sure that nobody got hit by a ball. But I think as well, there were a few that unfortunately didn't happen this year because of COVID, like the Great River Race. That's a huge event. That's got 300 boats that participate in rowing from Greenwich all the way up to nearly Teddington, so Ham near Teddington. And that's got massive involvement from the Port of London Authority. We have to get involved with working with the event organisers to make sure that things can be done safely and that the participants can enjoy their time on the river, whilst also maintaining the usual traffic that goes on the river, so the commuter services and the tourist tripping boats and the like. So you have to be really careful about managing that interface and making sure you've got the correct precautions in place to let both things happen together.
Thank you, Sarah. Your job sounds incredibly fascinating, actually. All these different aspects of the job that you need to juggle at the same time. So for you, time management and your time management skills must be absolutely crucial.
Time management, people management, and having good communication skills are key to the job.
Fabulous. I just want to wrap up and say we don't have any questions coming in, but I would like to thank you both so much for your time today and for giving us such an insight into what the Port of London Authority actually does. I think a lot of us just think of the river, but we don't actually think about what happens on the river and all of the work that goes into maintaining it. So thank you both very much indeed.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.